Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we are joined by Mr. Topher Gardner, and I'm so excited to have him in The Healing Home. But before we get started with that, I want to remind everybody that you can find out more about me, all things Healing Home, at michelleshealinghome.com. And also want to give a shout out to all the patrons out there. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate all the support you guys are showing. So, Topher is a wonderful man with, quote, over 20 years of professional experience with massage, coaching, construction, architecture, and inventing, end quote. He's also someone who challenges the mainstream narrative with a kind heart and good intent. And for those reasons and more, I'm honored at the opportunity to talk with him today. So help me in welcoming Topher to the stream. Hello, Topher.
Michelle, it's so good to be with you today.
Ah, awesome. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And how are you doing so far this lovely day?
Oh, it's been a great day. Very busy. We're recording on a Friday, and I always take half a Friday off. So whenever I can have a little time to myself, I'm a very happy guy.
Awesome. Thank you. And if I'm remembering correct, I think we're close to your birthday. Is that right?
Yes, it's March the 6th, the 3-6. I got a little of John Worrell Keeley magic, swimming around me. I was telling Marty Leeds the other day, like how this is kind of a funny thing, at least to me, because I'm a nerd. When I first started playing soccer, I wore the number 3. And then my soccer coach got me to kick a football in middle school, and I got number 3. And so 3 was like my number. And then I always loved 3 because I was a March baby. And then when I went to high school, I transferred to this huge high school, and number 3 was taken. But I had just learned about pi, like the number 3.14. and I was mesmerized by circles and what this pi was and how it was infinite. So when I found that I couldn't get 3, I took the 14, and 14 was my number in college and in the pros. So that was my 3.14, my pi connection to Marty.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know
Yeah.
you played professional soccer.
No, I played professional football.
Oh, football. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, football, that's funny. Football, soccer has that connection in the name, right?
Yeah. No,
Although they're different sports, obviously, but.
Yeah, in soccer, I was a striker in soccer, and then I kind of converted how I would, score goals into kicking a football.
Oh, interesting. Dude, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself for people who may not be familiar with you. So, if you just want to tell everybody where they can find you, and if you have anything that you want to begin the interview off with, the floor is yours for the beginning here.
Oh, thank you. My name's Christopher Gardner. All my friends call me Topher. I'm Tophizalicious on the screen here. You can find me at topherhq.com. That was one of my many professions, was making kombucha, like a bespoke kombucha in Costa Rica. So I called my kombucha Tophizalicious because what made my kombucha very specific was how much fizz it had. I hate kombucha that has like no pop to it. But I'm just a weirdo, eclectic person. My sun is right in between Aquarius and Pisces in the sky, so I'm the wonderful Venn diagram, the Vesica Pisces of like the weirdo, revolutionary, innovative Aquarian, and then also like the super sensitive, artistic Pisces. It just makes me like essentially an outlier. So when people try to like nail down what I do, like whenever I have to write a bio for a conference that I'm going to, I just tell people I'm a sculptor because I always use my hands. I've been using my hands with everything I've been doing for a very long time. And so I sculpt bodies. I've been now a deep tissue massage therapist, which is where I branch into polarity therapy, and also there's this thing called biodialectic cranial sacral work, which is like a more subtle form of polarity therapy. So I get to use my hands and sculpt people's bodies that way. And then I also build dome homes. I build earthen homes. I build with aircrete, and like my Aquarian nature never lets me just, you know, do the standard thing. I'm always like pushing the boundary with like, okay, I've done this medium. Now I'm going to this medium. Now I'm going to this medium. So with everything I do, the best way I can distill it down is I like to use my hands. I'm consistently using my hands. And I find that the chiral nature of there's a chiral nature to everything that I do. So that's probably the best synopsis that I could give at the moment.
Oh, I love that. And thanks for sharing where your sun is between the Aquarius and Pisces, because to me, I mean, just getting to know you over the past handful of months and talking to you more just one-on-one, I really see that in you. And when you told me that your birthday was very close to our scheduled interview, I'm like, oh my God, that's totally makes sense that he's a Pisces, because I see it for sure. And I love that you have that Vesica Pisces. That makes a lot of sense. And you blending so many of these things, you kind of are, in my opinion, a Renaissance man in many ways when I think of you, or a jack of all trades. You have so many talents in so many directions that it's really cool to think about the Vesica Pisces coming in, because I always remember the Vesica Pisces in school where you're doing the 2 circles. The Vesica Pisces is like the center where you're writing things that are like similar or something like that. That's what I always think about. And that's really cool. I love that image for you.
Yeah, they call it the Venn diagram.
Yes.
You know? Yeah, and so that's like it. I've been a professional astrologer, human designer for like probably 15 years, but I never advertise it because my Aquarian nature is always having me adapt to what I'm learning, like learning from your fiance Mario, the solar to the polar thing. That's something that I've been seeing like deep in my consciousness for a good 8 or 9 years. And so when I shifted from like actually like in 2010 through 2013, I took this course of real sky astrology from John Lamb Lash. Where he called it celestics. And it's essentially you're learning how to be like an old timey boat captain. You know, you have a planisphere and you have you have your little, sextant, so you can, notice declination and inclination. But his big thing that he taught me and taught all of us that took it was like, you're having a personal story with the luminaries. Now, he believed in the old cosmology. Like he believed in the cosmology that we're a planet moving through a solar system. And, he was very big in the Sophianic mystery school and, that whole thing. But the cosmology was still this, there are planets that are billions of miles away. And I was doing ayahuasca quite a lot because my best friend in Costa Rica was a shaman. And he was a very devout shaman. He lived the life. Like he lived it. He grew the plants. He made his own, like I made some of the ovens that he would cook down the reductions of jagubi and trachuna, and like I would just end up doing all these ceremonies with him because I would end up massaging so many of the people to ground them out. And so I was like the big grounding rod. And so here I am taking this Celestic course, like pretty much my 30s was like just a psychedelic whirlwind. So I'm massaging all these retreats in Costa Rica, and I'm also like, hepped up on DMT, internal DMT, and I'm interacting with the sky, and then I'm learning the archetypes of the sky from John Lamb Lash, JLL. And I'm like, one night, it was in 2014. It was like right before I went on my like little European award tour. I was out, and this, like, I was having an actual interaction with Pisces, like the constellation Pisces, because it was late March in the sky. It was right after the spring equinox, and it was just like, it was like so big and dancing in the sky. Because if you know Pisces, it's a huge constellation. It's like the size of Virgo. They're both really big in the sky. And that was one thing I really appreciated about real sky astrology, was like, when you look at the sky, like fucking Pisces is huge, Scorpio's like this big. Like, they're disproportionate in size, right? So here JL is like, you can have a personal relationship with these luminaries. But there was like, to me, I was like, how can I have a personal relationship with something, with the cosmology, that thing, the light, that thing could be dead and the light has been traveling for so long. Like, and so, Michelle, I literally cut the cord. My intellect cut the cord. No. It's what I'm saying. It was a bad thing. I cut the cord with the connection with the stars.
Oh, I thought you meant you cut the cord from like the idea that these luminaries are like billions of miles away.
No, it wasn't until the flat Earth that I recognized what I was going through.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a year later, I'm in Europe. I'm in this light polluted area, and then the whole flat Earth thing hits in 2015. And I was a space boy. Like, I was a fan of NASA. I didn't believe we went to the moon because I had read this book from Richard Hoagland called what was it? It was some bullshit book on I think it was called Impossible Mission. And I read that like in 2003 or 2004. And he was talking about the fakery that was going on with the lunar module, and like how they were faking out the because he was a NASA guy. They were running a controlled opposition with him. He was saying that they were essentially blacking out the huge bases that were on the moon. That's why everything looks so fake. He was doubling down on the fake space, right? But I already had it in my consciousness that the moon mission was garbage. And I had been reading Schauberger, and Schauberger was like, no, you don't get to places through propulsion. You get to places through impulsion. And then I knew people in the marine industry with propellers and the difference in power between a propeller and an impeller. And then I was looking at jet engines, and I was like, these jet engines, they're not actually propelling, because if they were propelling, the heat from the engine exhaust, the way they have it, is going underneath the wing. Well, that's where they supposedly say that they're holding all the fuel.
Right.
So there was like all these like little bits, and it wasn't until the flat Earth hit, and it was just like, they've been lying about all of it. In all those times I was with ayahuasca, it was real. What I was experiencing was real. It wasn't, because I kept making excuses in my mind that I was hallucinating. I kept making all these excuses that like, oh, this is, I'm just tripping balls and, whatever. And what's crazy is, and I know this will connect to your heart, because in 2013, I was in a ceremony, and it was a really horrible ceremony. Like, I had a really I was just getting my ass kicked. And after the second, cup of ayahuasca, everybody was like leveled. It was like a nuclear bomb went off. And I ended up waking up because I see this little girl walk into the Maloka, and she circles around the altar that was in the middle of the Maloka. And I had built the Maloka. Like, it was my creation. big reciprocal roof, you know, earthen walls that were like 2 feet thick, like bamboo. It was just really cool. And so here this little girl comes in, and as soon as I see her face, I'm like, I love you. It was my daughter.
Oh man.
But she was blonde hair, blue eyed. And at the time I was married to a woman that had deep Italian, like deep Italian features, like no blonde hair, blue eye going on. So I got really confused. And then I also, at the time in my life, I wasn't ready to be a dad. And I literally said out loud, and then I felt guilt about it. I was like, oh, I'm not ready. And she goes, I know, silly. I just came by to say hi.
Oh my God.
And then she literally went and danced around the altar and then went out the Maloka.
Whoa. I'm like tingling.
My daughter, that's her. The blonde hair, blue eye, you know, so fervent with life, the curls like her mom, like unbelievable. So I'm thinking that the majority of what I was experiencing with ayahuasca was real. Because there was other times with the same shaman that I had been with peyote with him, and we had all shared the quote unquote hallucination. Like we all saw the same thing, like that wasn't in the natural world. It was in the supernatural world.
Wow.
So that whole way of like kind of being informed of what the natural and the supernatural world is another reason why like I've been on this quest to like revise other people's systems that are based on wrong cosmology. Like my podcast is literally, I tell everybody this, I let all my guests know, like my podcast is so I can create a cohesive cosmology so I can teach the young ones something where they're not wasting their time.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful. Yeah. That's what we all need. I feel like that is so needed. Like it's always needed, but now more than ever. And the blending of minds and the people that we've been meeting, yourself included, who are pushing the boundaries with this stuff and not being afraid to question this stuff deeper than we've been questioning it for however many years it's been. You know, there's epiphanies that come through almost daily about making these connections with symbols, systems, beliefs that I've had for many years that shift just a little bit each day. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what that meant. Just like you're describing with the ayahuasca stuff. So it's like we have the abilities through plants and through ourselves and our own consciousness to like see these things. But when it really starts to come into fruition, like in the waking life, and you're seeing it and feeling it, there's no replacing what's going on right now. It's really cool. It's exciting. So I'm so excited.
And I'm so I'm so excited about this too, because I got pretty lonely in Costa Rica because all my peers were having kids before I was. So when you first get in those first few years of having children, you don't really have time for your crazy Aquarian Pisces bro who just wants to talk about magnetite and fire clay and you know what the stars are communicating and stuff like that. And so I didn't have anybody to really talk to. And then I go to Europe, I'm dating this woman, and it was a pretty empty relationship, and I couldn't really connect with her on an intellectual level. And I just got super lonely because I was like, within my peer group, I was the first person to really embrace flat earth. Like in 2015 and 2016, there were like 2 people that were like talking about flat earth. And I ended up meeting like Oli Demigard and Max Egan in Spain when I went to go see JLL. And we're all hanging out, and these cats are like, dude, like, you should like get online, man. You know, I was like, Yeah, I should, because for all intents and purposes, I needed to reach out and find people like you and Mario. Like I needed to find people like Chance, and now I just laugh at life because I literally live like in the middle of like Podcasterville. I have like Marty right down the street. I have Chance over there. I have Matt Presti over there. You know, like I have a couple other like pretty massive like people in that space that are looking to move to this area. And I'm just like, wherever you give your attention, where attention goes, energy flows. And so it's kind of neat for me because I knew back then my tribe, like the people that I knew I could count on, yes, they were physically close to me. But me being a philosophical creature, I couldn't count on them on an intellectual or heart-based level. I couldn't go into philosophy with them because where they were in their life with their stuff and their conditioning and their priorities. So going online and starting my first podcast and then like reaching out, I just got to like find my tribe. I got to find the people that I was in resonance with. And so that is like such an uber Aquarian thing, is to like ride the waves of electricity to like actually find who you could actually connect with, and I'm very, very grateful for it. Like in a deep way, it allowed me to like not be lonely. It allowed me to actually, and in all honesty, the first 3 months of my relationship with my wife, was online. We would Skype every night. We would just sit there and talk to each other. So I got to know her on a philosophical level before anything. And that was incredible, because then when we met in the physical, it was just gravy. I already kind of knew who she was. So I'm kind of a weirdo in that way. I think you'll get to know somebody's if you get to know somebody's mind, you actually really know them.
Yeah, I like that. That's totally how it goes, because then you're able to observe their behaviors even without seeing them physically, seeing what they
Yes.
do on a daily, you know what I mean? And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, that's the real deal. And I love that. And I know we talked about that in our conversation when you had me on your show about, just having that time with your wife before anything physical even came into the sphere, and how healing that was for you and how important it was for your relationship. And that's how you build like a solid relationship, in my opinion, is by, yeah, the physical stuff is great, obviously, but when you are able to connect with somebody like that, and then you're like, oh my God, you get me. And we haven't even taken those other steps yet to the intimacy side. It's a glorious feeling, and it's really cool. So that's really
Yeah.
awesome to hear.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because I know from statistics, I know from the norms perspective, they use the internet for lust-based things. And once again, I'm like an outlier in the sense that I used it for philosophical things.
Mm.
And I think, and I'm gonna ride this lightning as long as it's available, because I'm under no illusion that it will last.
Right. Yeah, that's smart. I think about that stuff all the time too, of like, what is this going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 2 years? Who knows? You can't like really project it necessarily, but
I
having the
think
philosophy.
I think we can actually see the future in the last the few larger productions that Netflix put out. So I told my wife that we watched that Barack Obama movie that he produced, the one that was about like the quasi end of the American Empire, and it had
Oh
like
yeah.
Julia Roberts in it and stuff like that. That movie was written by AI. And so what I'm seeing with AI is AI, it's an aggregator, essentially. It aggregates information, and to the non-alive person that hasn't already made the associations, and by alive, what I mean is, I'm not saying that there's zombies out there. When when you are actively a creator, you're like, from a law perspective, you're a living man or woman, right? You're in good standing, your feet are grounded, and you have jurisdiction with your creator. And you only have jurisdiction with your creator. You have no false idolship. That's what I mean by a living man or woman. So a living man or woman, they can spot AI immediately because the correlations that are being made are disjointed. The correlations that are being made are on such a superficial level. Like, don't let Mario see that movie, because he just might commit Harry Carey, because he's so upset with like how fucking horrible the symbolism, how hack the symbolism is. And so I know what they're doing is like, they're going, okay, we're going to make a movie about conspiracy. And it's a movie about the conspiracy of the end of the American Empire. Okay. So, and they typed in there, they're like, okay, so let's combine, Asia. Let's combine the black-white tension. Let's combine an EMP. Let's combine this, and they just put it in their aggregator. The AI then wrote a script, and because they have no symbolic literacy, they thought it was good. They thought it was accurate. And so this is like the third movie that I've seen that I'm like, oh, this is utter garbage. Wow. And like, you have like all the fear mongers out there, the people that are chasing clicks, that are like, oh my God, revelation of the method. I'm like, absolutely not. They've literally just aggregate what the conspiracy theorists are talking about, and they feed it into the algorithm, and the algorithm writes the plot. And because these people aren't living, they're not a living man or woman, they're like, oh my God, this is so creative. It is utter dross. In fact, what would be a fun thing for Mario to do, because he's so like even keel, is for him to do like a Mystery Science 3000, Ooh. You and him, where you're both sitting there and all you see is the back of your heads, and you guys have popcorn and you're watching some of this AI driven plot stuff, and you guys are just like throwing popcorn at the screen, like yelling at it, and like, do Mystery Science 3000. I think that would be hilarious.
Oh, that would be awesome, because I'm so glad we're going here with this film, because when it came out, we, both were like, well, should we watch it, just because, it's like, let's see what's in there. When we set up, we don't have like a TV set up. We have to we pull things out, we set it up, whatever. So we set everything up, and we're sitting there and we're like, yeah, let's not watch this. Like, we're just gonna not, like, both our instincts were just like, let's not watch this. We'll just kind of like maybe listen to what other people have to say about it and go from there. So I'm glad we listened to ourselves and then hearing what you had to say about it. That's interesting about the AI level too, and that disjointedness that happens there. And I love the you talking about the real man or real woman, and that difference there, and how people can pick up on that stuff when they are in their role like that. Because that's some of the stuff that I've noticed with the AI things, where it's like, man, there's just something that's like totally off about it. But I get it. I understand why it's attractive to people, but very interesting points there. I really like the idea of the Science Theater 3000 too.
It's really the difference too of, so like Victor Schauberger, who is like my hero, I'm a fanboy. He said you can always tell the consciousness of a civilization by the quality of its water, its music, and its forest. And he said what makes a civilization advanced is quality, not quantity.
Yes.
And what the whole AI thing is, it's an aggregation of quantity. So you and I both know intelligence favors the minority. Intelligence doesn't favor the majority. On the bell curve, when you're looking at, and all intelligence means is, are you accurately reading the signals from your environment? That's all intelligence means. Do you have the capacity to accurately gauge the signals that you're receiving? And if you do have a higher intelligence, not only are you accurately reading the signals that you're receiving, you can adapt to new signaling and new patterning. Okay? That's not what AI is. AI is literally combing through and going, okay, 95% of people think this. This is what I'm going to say. So a friend of mine that I'm in business with, where we're inventing a system for water purification and orgone production, we know how to do what we're doing. So we asked ChatGPT to tell us how to do what we're doing. Hey! Hold on one second.
Yeah, you're good.
Shut up! Stop! No! Shush! No.
Awesome.
When wiener dogs attack, she's vicious. She's 16 pounds of pure wiener viciousness.
Oh my God. That sounds crazy.
Yes. You don't want to mess with the wiener dog. The UPS man will rue the day. Hey, it was UPS. That might be for my birthday present. Who knows?
Nice.
So here you have this thing that's aggregating, and it goes, oh, there's 90 billion, insertions of this idea. And there's only 2 of that. We're going to focus on the 90 billion. No. What did Jesus say? No, if you have 100 sheep and one of the sheep goes that way, go after the one that goes over there. That's his way of saying the one that's not in the flock is actually the intelligent one.
Right.
And statistically, that bears out. And so what I'm seeing with AI and people's fascination with it is it takes work off your plate. Like, I'm definitely going to use AI to do like cover art for my podcast and stuff like that. Because I'm lazy. I'm not going to take the time to learn all the different things and like go that way. I'm like, people want to consume something kind of flashy when they see like a thumbnail or whatever. Okay, I'll give that work to AI. But my goodness, I think in like 5 or 6 years, like literally all the media you're going to see that's not coming from like people like you and I, it's all going to be AI driven.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
So that's when the archetype of media, that's when she dies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I think about this kind of stuff a lot of like, what are you reading? How are you going to know? And just like you talked about, you will know if you're in your center, I think. But, the amount of people that are fooled all the time, it's just like, wow, I trip out to think about what that might look like, down the road. But just keep holding steady with, with everything else that we know, I think is the only solution. Just like anything is always to keep going. And especially if you're on the right path and you feel that, don't stop,
I have to say, anybody who's listening to this, just find some like old people in your life. Find some old people. And like for you Zoomers, I'm not talking about a 30-year-old. I'm talking about like people in their 70s and 80s. And invariably, when you talk to somebody that's lived that long and you bring up your fears, they'll literally just put their hand on your shoulder and be like, it's going to be okay. And that's the truth. That's why the elders in the past were venerated, because you can go and yeah, there's going to be deaths of friends in your life, and there's going to be tragedy and sorrow and all this, but you're here to live the hero's journey. You're kind of going to go through it all. But when you talk to old people, a lot of old people, like if they get to a certain age, that means that they've lived a certain health, they've had a certain health span. And I would recommend talking to people that are not financially strapped. And so, because I have a lot of young men that ask me to mentor them, and I tell them the same thing. I say exactly the same thing. I'm like, just in your local environment, go find an old rich guy to talk to. Because old rich guys, and for women, go find an old rich woman. And by rich, I mean somebody that's not struggling. I'm not saying that they have to be like a billionaire or whatever. And just go talk to them. And invariably, the old guy or the old woman will be like, hey, it's going to be okay, man. And they'll tell you all the things that they survived. And you know what? At the end of your life, you're going to survive all that too until, Kronos comes and takes you. No big deal. It's just the drama, the adrenaline rush of Medea. I think it's going to be brilliant because people are going to get oversaturated with quantity. And this oversaturation, I think Mario brought it up in your last presentation with him, where he's like, how porno has gotten like so over the top.
Yes.
And it's just like, I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s, like if we found my dad's Playboys, it was like, jackpot! Woo! And for all of you really young folk that listen to this stuff, like they didn't show anything crazy. Like literally you could watch like normal television now, and that was like what Playboys used to be. And so it was like incredible. So when we saw like a human woman out and about, it was just like, oh my God, that's like the most beautiful thing ever. And now like you have this like crazy whatever pouring out there, the overstimulation that occurs in the mind, all the dopamine receptors, don't work anymore and all that stuff. Too bad, Medea, you're going away. You're going to see this huge reversion back to like people like gathering in real life, in IRL, in Ireland. Everybody's going to move to Ireland, and they're going to be in real life, and they're going to be drinking beers together, and it's going to do this humongous swing back, just because there's not going to be any satisfaction in that.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And I love thinking about it that way because, I love gathering people in general, whether it's online but really my passion is doing it in person and having like being a hostess and making people feel comfortable, wanting them to have conversation, and that thought of just thinking like they will be bored with this because there is not going to be substance. It's not going to be enough probably to hold the attention, and I like thinking of it from that perspective.
Well, I figured out, have you ever done virtual reality?
No, and the reason why I haven't done it, honestly, is because I get like really bad motion sickness. And
so that's a good sign.
Yeah, so I'm like, I can't do it.
So check this out. Virtual reality is failing horribly. It's failing. And the reason why I think it is, and I was just weaving the other night on another podcast, and it just totally came to me, because I've been trying to preach this, like with the astrology, is like, it's very obvious, like when I see somebody's luminaries, that they don't perceive the world like I do. They wouldn't. Like, why would God make a copy? And right. if we're here to be the subjective, first person viewer of God's creation, so God can have a novel experience of what's created. Like, because I always thought as a little kid, it kind of perturbed me to hear my Christian pastor at my church say, God is omnipresent and omnipotent. he wrote the first word and the last word, and he knows everything that will ever happen from the Alpha to the Omega. And as a little kid, I was like, the first thing my mind went to is, I hate reruns. Because I remember there was like one season like where the A-Team, like the cast of A-Team didn't like, re-up their contracts. And so they just kept playing, reruns of the A-Team from the season before. And I love the A-Team. I had my A-Team. Do you even know what the A-Team is?
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it or anything.
Girl, I pity the fool. Like, look up Mr. T. Look up, I had an A-Team lunchbox, and they were playing reruns of A-Team, and I hated it. I was like, I've already seen this. And then I go to church, and then the pastor's like all high and mighty and stiff and stodgy and like gross behind the scenes. And he's like, God knows everything that's going to happen. And even my little mind was like, I know I'm not God. I would be so bored. Like, what's the fucking point if I know what's going to happen? And so the cosmology that I'm coming to and that I see is creation's created. Boom, it's all done. But the consciousness that it witnesses creation wants to have a novel experience. And this is where I love the Christian ethos, is like God created you specifically the way you are, which the Christian ethos is the only ethos that has that. I've looked at all the Eastern mysticism and esotericism. They're monists. They're like, you're just on the wheel. It's the total solar bullshit. But the Christian ethos is more of the polar ethos, because it's like, no, you were created specifically as you are, and you're really effing different than everybody else. And it's because God wants to have an actual, he doesn't want reruns. It was created, but like the witnessing awareness that sponsors this vehicle, this biological bipedal vehicle, it wants to know its creation in a unique way. That's why we're freaking here. Like, we're literally here to see like the creation. And then God, he's like, I created everything and I want to have a novel experience of it. And I actually want to have the novelty of what it feels like to actually be a creator. And so then it gives us the capacity to fucking create. And so we can have this novel experience. So it can have this novel experience. It's like, yes, even though it's all been done. It's only in the temporal realm. But because there's all these infinite, well, it's not infinite. I don't know how many there are. But there's all these subjective experiences, from the animals to the fungus to the human. And I'm not saying we're all equal. I think what makes the human kind of special is that we have more capacity to create and all that than, let's just say, an instinctual being. But still, God's like, yeah, difference. Yay. No repeats. And so, because I've looked at thousands of charts now, and no one's even close to being like anyone else. And the reason why AI is going to fail, and the reason why I know for a fact virtual reality has been like the most devastating flop ever from an investment perspective, is they're running under the assumption that we all perceive the same.
Yes.
And we do not. I know for a fact the few people that I loved in my life, what made me in love with them, the love that I was feeling, was that the love, if you were to characterize it on an intellectual level, was I wanted to know very deeply how they actually are experiencing the world. I wanted to know how they experience it. To me, that's what love is. Like when you have a child, you want to know what they're going through and how they're experiencing, and like you want like the nuance of it, because it's not yours. It's a completely novel experience relative to you. And the people you don't love, you could give a shit. Unless you're a narcissist, or unless you're like some sort of energetic vampire that you need, dopamine hit from attention or whatever. So I'm like looking at this whole thing and I'm like, I know for a fact that we do not experience the same thing. You and I could be standing shoulder to shoulder. We could have the same conditioning, like grow up in the same area, but because you're a woman and I'm a man, we're different polarities in our body. We have totally different angles. Our actual antenna of our body is a different shape. Our astrology is completely different, which I now know. Like I know in my heart of hearts, the astral body is the stars. Like when people talk about, oh, I'm astral traveling, and they're like out, in some masturbatory theta state, that's not the astral plane. The astral plane is literally the luminaries. That is your astral plane. And so you and I are standing there, and we agree on everything, and we're like bros, and we're broing out, and we could look at the same thing, like physically look at it and bump fists and be like, yeah, totally agree on it. 5 years later, we come back and talk to each other about it, and we're going to have a different experience.
Right.
And that is why this virtual reality thing that they're trying to do will never work, because their algorithms don't account for the difference between people.
Man, I love this perspective. You are seriously like shining so much glorious light on some of the thoughts I've had about this, because this is such a healthy perspective of it, and it's a more holistic perspective, and it's more realistic, which I really appreciate, because also taking into account everybody's traumas, everybody's experiences. It's like we all have different things that we've gone through, and we all react to things differently. Someone smells a rose and they think of chocolate, and someone smells a rose and they think of oranges, or they think of their grandma, or they think of the mountain that they grew up on where the roses grew on the side of the road, or whatever. And so you're so right with the AI. It's incapable of feeling or knowing that. And I think like that's one of the things that, you're helping me, that I will be keeping in mind, like moving forward, for sure.
It's a fool's errand, because what were we all told with genetics when you and I were coming up in the 90s? Genetics, the second they map the entire genome, will never be sick again. Like, remember all the BS?
Oh, yes.
Just science, the seance, just masturbating all over itself. Once we have the genome, our intellect, we will have it. It's Jurassic Park for humans. And once they map the genome, what did they figure out? Trillions of dollars. God knows how many fetal cells. The reason like why they like legalized abortion. Hey, everybody, how do you think they're mapping the human genome? Where do you think a lot of that stuff went? So they get to mapping the genome, and they're like, yes, the pinnacle. And then they find out, genes aren't actually what causes expression in cellular biology. Oopsie. Oh, I'm sorry. And now they're doing the same thing with AI and the whole thing with the virtual reality. You have people in cities wearing this Apple thing. I'm like, first of all, if you have enough discretionary income to spend $2,500 on a goggle, that right there shows that you're a fucking idiot. that I mean, just seriously.
Oh, the priorities. It's so fucked.
I literally see the poorest people in the airport the last time I was flying, like the people that you could tell, like literally everything about what they were wearing and how they were presenting themselves was just complete credit.
Yeah.
There's no savings. that I'm like, oh, that's a debt-based individual. Like that is a completely debt, and you could tell by their body language and like just like because they were fronting. You know, that's what we used to call it in Florida. They were just fronting. You know, I'm sitting there with my wife and we're watching these idiots walk around, and I'm like, oh man, no. And they were not comfortable.
Right.
Like watching them do it. And I'm just like, this is going to fail. Just like, you know, I had very rich clients that I worked for. I remember I went and I worked this retreat. And part of the retreat was they had this virtual reality tennis match. And so I was like, oh, I'll try it. So I put it on, and I played tennis at a pretty high level in high school. And I was like, you know, I know what I'm doing on a tennis court. And so I'm playing this tennis match. And it was so disorienting because the algorithm that was actually feeding me inputs was incorrect. Like it wasn't that the graphics were bad or anything like that. But it was, once again, the algorithm doesn't know the difference in how I perceive relative to how you perceive, because we all perceive differently. So right now, the algorithm is hearing my voice and it's going, motherfucker, how are we going to learn how everybody else perceives? And that's the joke of it. That's when it just like, you know, you have to unplug the big modem of the internet and go, replug it in and restart it. Because it
does not compute.
It does not compute.
Wow. I love this. You know, I'm so glad that we're letting this flow and this is where we're at, because this is something that I think about quite a bit. But, you know, if we can, I sort of want to shift gears a little bit, because I have a couple things that I want to really pick your brain about. And one of them is what I heard you guys talking about on Interverse just this past Wednesday with Chance and Kyle and Slick. And you brought up your presentation you did at Anarchapulco recently, and you were talking about electroculture, right? And so you're about to do an experiment with the flagpole, which I really want to know more about. And you guys talked a little bit about it, but you're basically going to be using the flagpole to, is it a static generator or electrostatic generator? Is that what you're thinking of creating? And you're going to be grounding it?
So do you know how electrostatic generators usually work?
A little bit. I know more about electroculture than electrostatic.
So look up the Lord Kelvin lightning generator.
Okay.
So when I moved to Costa Rica, I had just started studying John Morell-Keeley and Victor Schauberger. And in Callum Coates' book, Living Energies, he highlighted Lord Kelvin's lightning, his I forget if they called it the lightning machine or, you know, lightning generator, but in I think it was 1874 or 1876, the gentleman that made up the I guess you would say the system by which you, like, we've all heard of the temperature Kelvin. Well, Lord Kelvin, he was noticing that whenever there was a frontal boundary that would come into an area, the static electricity would go up. So he observed this for years, and he devised an experiment of how he could actually produce static. And he had noticed that there was like almost everybody, all the geniuses at the turn of the 19th century, or what was it, the turn of the 20th century, they all had this, they knew that the origin of plasma came from the ether. And in this particular environment, in the atmosphere that we're in, the fluid in the environment was what induced the plasmas from the ether. And so on a very basic level, when we see a frontal boundary, which is the front side of a storm, like if you're out in the ocean, we call it a squall line. You see the boundary coming in, and that's where all the lightning is. And we're told that the lightning is because of temperature differential. And a better way of saying it is the temperature differential is the electrical boundary. So if you have, like just the other day, we got our temperature went from 78 degrees to 22 degrees. Like Kyle brought that up in what we were talking about when I asked him if his nipples were, the hardest nipples in his house. That's what I was referring to, because we had this crazy like drop in temperature, and it was this totally induced frontal boundary. This is how they do weather modification. It's actually very easy, because if they were doing this in 1870 something, like that's 150 years of practice. Like they know how to do this. So Lord Kelvin set up this thing where he had two little water droppers, and they would drop water, and the water would go through these coils. And he didn't call them coils. They were essentially just copper rings. And then the water then would terminate in an insulated vessel. Like imagine, like, when you have a candle that burns the wick all the way down, like some candles, depending on how they're made, you just end up with the wax on the outside.
Yeah.
So he had those types of vessels with like a little hole drilled in them. So the water would fill that up and then go out the hole. So you'd have a vessel that was collecting the water. But the trick, and this is where Lord Kelvin was really, really ingenious. He was like, when I see lightning, it's the temperature differential, and you'll get these updrafts. And I've been paragliding, like I know updrafts. And the updraft is essentially the levitational aspect that occurs when when you have two similar polarities coming together. So like whenever you get like live blood analysis, they'll read your zeta potential. And it's like zeta potential is where your red blood cells have a really high negative charge. So they stay away from each other, because like charges don't like to touch each other. They keep a distance from each other. They repel each other. So what Lord Kelvin did was like, okay, water's dropping here, water's dropping here. Okay, as the second water drops, it becomes a dynamo. It's spinning. So he made these really fine water droplets. And so these little dynamos would be spinning. They instantly would charge these copper rings. And then what did that tricky guy do? He crossed this conductor over here down underneath here. And then he crossed this conductor underneath here. And so now the water with the charge is now it's going to enter the same charge underneath it. And so he would get levitation. And so what he did with the bottom basins, then he had another two conductors that would come up, and those two conductors, depending on the distance from them, they would discharge. And that's why it was called a lightning maker. And so I saw that and I was like, I can do that. And so I started making these Lord Kelvin, and I had no money, by the way. I moved to Costa Rica, lost a fortune, wasn't doing good from a financial perspective. But I was like, I have to make this. So I bought all these like crazy big copper conductors, and I built this. But where I was, it was too humid. And so what happens in humid environments is the electricity dissipates out into the environment. Like when it gets cold where you are, and then you shuffle across the carpet, that's when you feel the static. Well, so I had to go up to like 10,000 feet of elevation in Costa Rica to do the testing, and it worked. And so what he said was, for every millimeter of distance between where you would get the little shock, that was 1,000 volts of potential. So 1 centimeter, which is like, a little bit less than half of an inch, was 10,000 volts. An inch was 25,000 volts. And so there's no circuit that you run in your house that's more than 220 volts. And then you'll get all these people talking about, well, voltage, that's not amperage. And, you get into all these electrical things. And I'm like, fuck off. Step it down. Add resistance, and you get your ampage. So the way I can say this to everybody to make it super simple, if I'm just dropping water with gravity, and I'm able to produce 20, let's just say for shits and giggles, I'm producing 22,000 volts at a discharge rate of every 2 to 3 seconds. All I have to do is hook up diodes, which is a unidirectional discharge, figure out how many diodes I need along that line, and then guess what? The discharge will be quicker. And it will be less amount of voltage. Well, it doesn't take a fucking genius to figure out, okay, I can do this and get down to 55 hertz or 50 hertz, which just means 50 cycles per second at 220 volts, which is what your house runs at. This is what they were doing in the past. That's the real hydroelectric power. So what I'm seeing is, I went nuts when I found this out and I did the experiment. I was like, no way. And it was 2007. So nobody was like really into this stuff. Like you had, I think Google Video just got bought out by YouTube. And it was like, then I was down in an area that had no internet. And I was just like, why are we messing around with Pelton wheels and micro hydro? Why aren't we just building these static field generators? I go to Tesla Tech with my man, Moshe Daniel. We're selling these orgone accumulators, and we're talking to people that know their shit, like really know their shit. And I came across this old timer, and he was like, Gardner, back in our farm, we just use these big old, electrical poles that got blown down in a storm. And, the city wasn't doing anything with it. So we took the little insulators that were on the ground and we just put them on our own poles on our farm. And then we had this big, long old wire. It might have been 100, 200 feet. I can't remember. And then we dropped. And so that line was just out there dangling in the wind. And, we dropped one of the conductors of one side of the conductor down in the ground and we grounded it out. And the other one, we put a coil on. And then we just took we kept the circuit open and we just brought 2 lines to this other thing and we charge all of our batteries in our house. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And then you come to find out that all of the electricity in the world, all of it, the sham that there's this huge generator in the center of your city, and they're working hard. They're putting in fuel and they're doing all this stuff. And they're doing it for you because they love you. Incorrect. All those wires that you see everywhere, they're literally a conductor. So think of a conductor. What does a conductor do? Is the conductor doing the work? No.
No.
The conductor is telling the atmosphere what it wants. So your house has this little meter on it. The meter aggregates all of the load that house needs. So you turn on a light and that sends a signal to the meter. The meter distributes that signal up into the conductor. That's a wire up there. The wire, the big conductor wire, is like, oh, hey, atmosphere, I need this amount of electricity. And then that drops the electricity down into your house, and then they charge you for it.
Yeah, a lot.
So it's biblical. Like my people die for lack of knowledge. So what I'm seeing in the electroculture world, and the reason why I framed it the way I did, I was very intentional with it, is because the electroculture world is kind of benign, you know. What I'm talking about is the way things are. Like, this is scalable. So in the electroculture world, the higher your antenna on the south side of your garden is, the more juice you'll induce to give to your plants. Okay. When I was talking in Acapulco, you know, that area of Acapulco had been devastated by a Cat 5 hurricane. And I noticed when I was walking to the conference before I spoke, it was very obvious the flags that were flying with the flagpoles. And I was thinking about what I was going to be talking about with biochar. And I just see like all these devastated trees, like mainly palm trees, because it's tropical. They're all ratty. They all have like one palm frond, you know, they were beat up by the storm. But I see these flags flying. And I'm looking at the flags and I'm like, I just had the instinct. I was like, those were the static field generators. Because the same dude that told me about how he had this farm with this, you know, this big copper conductor in the sky, he's like, yeah, I think you could just take, you know, some sheer cloth or something and just have it blowing in the wind. And if you had like some sort of mister, and that mister like sprayed that cloth as it was moving, and then you had some filaments in that, I think it would just generate more potential than you would even know what to do with. And so I was like, dude, that dude was telling me about flags. It just took me 15 years to make the correlation.
Yeah, that's totally a flag. That's exactly what it is.
That's a flag. Yes. He was literally telling me about a flag. I'm just an idiot, and it didn't land until I'm, you know, like half dying in Mexico, you know, walking and like seeing these flags amongst all these ratty trees. And I was like, that's what he was saying. And then I instantly was like already contemplating what I was going to talk about with my presentation. And I was like, what we're going to do is we're going to fly our effing flags at the end of our garden bed. Like, just to put it simply, like, you could scale this up any amount that you want. But I would say I'm 99% confident that previous to the last like real reset and inquisition of Europe, many of the structures were machines. Like, in today's world, we don't think of our house as a machine. You know, we think of our house as like a dwelling.
Right.
know? In the past, they were much more efficient. The home was a machine. And I had direct insight into this because for many years I built beehive domes. In the beehive dome, you use a lot of barbed wire. And I've built coils and motors before. And so literally you would have 42 layers. Like you ever see those donut for like little kids where they like will put one donut on top of another donut and they're varying shapes and they can build like a cone.
It's around a pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was how I built domes. You just do one ring and another ring and another ring. It's very tedious. It's very hard work. But after like 42 of them, you'd have this nice beehive shape, perfectly supported, but you were running a coil in it. And I was building my fourth one and I was really pissed off because it was too much work for me. And I'm sitting there at lunchtime and I'm like halfway up on the dome and I'm like sitting on some barbed wire and I'm looking at it and I'm like, it was after I went to Tesla Tech and I was talking to this guy about how he was grounding out these like things, these like lines on his farm, and it was producing energy. And I was like, oh my God, this dome is a big earthen battery. It has this massive coil, like I think for a 20-foot diameter dome, you could do the math. So 20 times 3.14 is 6, let's just say 62 times 2. So that's, let's just say for shits and giggles for extra, because you have to like clip and move, you have 130 feet of metal conductor. You do that 42 times. That's a mile worth of coil in one dome. Do you know how much juice you can get from a coil that's a mile long?
No, how much?
I don't know how to calculate it.
Like an infinite amount, I'm assuming.
No, it's not infinite. Like in the temporal realm, we can't experience the infinite.
Okay.
But it's just a lot. It's more than you could ever use. It's so much more juice than you could ever use. And I was sitting there and I just, once again, I was dumb smacked. I was like, dude, the way they used to build, like I'm doing this with earth and barbed wire. And they were doing their thing with geopolymers. And they were putting copper on the top of their roofs with spires that were like 40, 50 feet up in the air. Do you think they did all that wrought iron work just for fun? No, not at all. They knew the higher that they went up, the more potential they could grab. The conductors that were running in the building were all brought to the cistern in the middle of the building, in the basement. And then they used the cistern as essentially as an earthen battery. And then they ran the positive polarity up to one side of their resistive heating system in their fireplaces, because they weren't fireplaces. They were resistive heaters. And then they ran the other conductor to the other side. And you used to see in all these old buildings, it looked like a fireplace, but it wasn't. It was a heater. It did emit heat when it worked. But how does resistive heating work? It's exactly what I was telling you before. You bring two potentials together that don't want to be next to each other, and it creates heat. So that's why they would walk into some of these Victorian homes with like 10 fireplaces and there was no carbon on the mantle. You had never seen a fire burn anywhere. They were using all this potential energy from the height of the building and the mass of the building. They had a ground battery and they redistributed that energy throughout for lighting and heat.
Wow.
The buildings were machines. And so what I'm thinking, the way I'm going to be like incognito about it is I'm going to go, oh, I just want my plants to grow better. I'm just a gardener. My last name is Gardner. I'm just living my namesake. I make some dirt, you know. I have this podcast that's about dirt. It's the biochar. You could just call it the Dirt Podcast. And we're just making dirt and playing. And yeah, I have a lot of pride, a lot of family pride. So I put a flagpole at the end of my garden bed. And yeah, I'm just a very, very proud gardener.
I foresee this working beautifully. Really, I do. I think you're you're really gonna bring a lot of awesome things to the table with this. That's why I had to ask you today about it more because, the electroculture thing. I learned about electroculture it was probably about a decade ago,
Mhm.
because I was interested in gardening and I was gifted a book. Like it's like Old Time Garden Wisdom is like the title of it or something. And there's a whole
Mhm.
chapter on electroculture. And at that point I had never heard of it, but the man who wrote about it just talking about how actually simple it was, like talking about putting bike spokes without the tires on it,
Mhm.
pie plates, you name it, any tin cans, just like how he talked about how his grandmother did this throughout the garden. And so it
Mhm.
just lit me up right away. And then I thought it was really interesting that just last year, it just kind of like had this huge revival. And one of the things that pinged my mind and my memory was you talking about using a ring. And then you're also obviously talking about the coil system. But what I found in my electroculture experience from last year's garden, was that when I used just copper wire, even galvanized wire, and I made it into a ring and I put it around the base of the plant, that seemed to work better than
Mhm.
some of the coils that I had. So, I mean, I know you're speaking about the rings and the coils. What would be the difference between that? So, like, I
The
put a big ring around my goldenrod. I have two big areas of goldenrod in each corner of the garden, and I did one with the ring and one without. And the one with the ring was the tallest, most vibrant it's ever been. And I was like, huh, okay. So that was the ring. And then here was the coil and everything else. So if you have opinions on that, or you want to expand on it, that would be awesome.
the ultimate is called, it's an array. It's called the Lahovsky array. Hopefully you can see it. I'll draw it for you.
Okay.
Um, let me see here. Where do I have? So, oops. Let me bring you closer here. So, if you have a ring that terminates like that,
Yep.
where there's a gap, that is by far the most powerful thing that you can do.
Okay. Yeah. And that's what I did.
When you have that gap facing south.
Okay.
So there's all these ways that you can essentially structure or induce. I like to say induce quality. And so the a true Lahovsky array is where you do this and then you have a secondary one inside. And then you have a tertiary one inside that. And then you have a fourth one inside of that. And so these rings, you know how you women wear those really beautiful bracelets that have like, they don't actually clasp, but they stay open, and how they have a little ball?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Just buy a bunch of cheap ones of those and put them at the base.
Ah, okay.
Make sure that they're conductive, obviously.
Right.
And if you had the money and you could go like with silver or something like that, you'd have incredible results. Now, what I was bringing up the other day with Kyle is the most coils, the way they're wound is the coil, like you'll have an axis like this, right? That's vertical, and the coil will do this. That's the way the majority of coils are done in the world. And Tesla was like, Tesla and Keeley, all the heavyweights, even like Oliver Heaviside, they said, with that, it's a waste, because when electricity is moving through this, right, and it's creating a step up of electricity, there's a magnetic wave that's distributed perfectly laterally. And you're not catching it because your coil is going up. So they were very big on the feminine principle of catching that. So the vertical energy is male. The horizontal energy is female. And you can tell that. Like, I see that with clients. Like, very feminine women, their hips go side to side.
Ah, yes.
You can always tell the woman that's like wanting to, like, you know, like induce a little attention, because her hips go boop, 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 boop. And then you could tell like the really male people, because they're always going vertical. It looks like they're bouncing. And even you could see a woman that has a very feminine form, but if she's going vertical when she walks, it doesn't induce attraction, because she's actually showing her male nature.
Wow, yes.
And vice versa. You could see a very tall man and you're like, whoa, he looks mannish. But if he's moving side to side when he walks, you're not going to get the feeling that he's mannish.
Right.
So what Tesla said was, you guys are being inefficient with your coils. So the energy is still going to go up. Let me do this with a different color. The energy is still going to go up that way. But we need to get the magnetic force, the female magnetic force. So let's do a pancake coil, where we wind our coil all on the same plane. Plane of inertia much, anybody? Madre Tierra, hey guys, we're all on Mother Earth. Duh, we live on a pancake coil.
Dude, Topher, this is awesome. I'm so glad I asked you about the rings, because yes, I love this.
This is the key. So when Tesla would do his circuits, the reason why he could literally have as much voltage as he wanted was he never terminated a circuit. Like, his circuits weren't technically circuits, because technically a circuit is when it's the Ouroboros. And he was railing against his competitors of what idiots they were when he was alive, because he was like, you guys are just making an Ouroboros. You're terminating the positive into the negative. So you're neutralizing the circuit. So there's never an additional energy. So the Lahovsky circuit, the reason why the Lahovsky ring, like that bracelet, we'll just call it Michelle's bracelet. So your Michelle's bracelet does this, right? This gap, a signal comes through the conductor, nature fills the gap. Oh, nature abhors a vacuum. Mother Nature is like, oh my God, they're trying to assist the plant. Okay. She's your mother. She's always giving. Oh, you want this to be bigger. You're literally putting down a sigil that actually matches the way this thing works. And this is the whole notion of perfect nesting. Perfect nesting is you signaling your environment that you know you've taken the time to understand her. And you're a woman. Any woman that feels that her man or another woman took the time to understand her, what happens to you? You just become a giver.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, you took the time to know me. You took the time to understand my nuance. Okay, here. it's obvious you care for your plants and you want more yield. Okay, here you go.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. I
Yeah.
love that. Wow.
She is such a giver, man.
Oh, it's so true. And yeah, once you really realize that too, I mean, the amount of abundance and the doors that open for you,
Yeah.
just like this here, it's incredible. It just it doesn't stop. It continues because then, like you've been talking about and like you've been sharing, the amount of inspiration that just continues to roll. It's like your coil,
Mm-hmm.
you maybe put it in your garden, but think about just having that coil. Like I picture imagining a coil like that above my head and
Mm-hmm.
just having that image, having that intention, walking around with that imaginary, but not much imaginary, because it's like I'm making it so above my head. Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What can we be doing just even on those subconscious levels with these shapes and the ideas of this and the energy of Mother Nature? I mean, to me, that like puts me into a really cool headspace when I think of it like that.
Michelle, this is why I build domes.
Yep.
So I really liked domes until I started building them. And then I think it was 2011, because I had built geodesic domes, which are like the Buckminster Fuller domes, and I had built the beehive domes, which were an invention of Nadir Khalili. And they both had their strengths and a lot of weaknesses. And I wasn't really happy with where that was going in my consciousness. I was like, this is a lot of work for not much yield. And then I came across the Japanese star dome. And I had lived in an ashram for a while, and I would draw mandalas because I was always artistic, my Pisces side. And as the story goes with the Japanese star dome, was that the inventor, he was actually looking at the Tibetan sun mandala, and he had like the Jodie Foster moment in Contact, where he popped that mandala into 3 dimensions. And when he said, like, when I was reading that and I could see that everything was under tension, that brought me back to Victor Schauberger, where Victor Schauberger was saying, no, you never want equilibrium. You want dynamic disequilibrium. And dynamic disequilibrium is that play between the male and female energy. It's always a tension and it's never equal. Like, this whole preaching about equality is utter bullshit. That's why the world is getting neutered. It's because when you have equality, you have a monotone. What you want is a dynamic disequilibrium, which means sometimes the woman dominates, sometimes the man dominates. But there's never a monotone. And that's the way Mother Nature works. And so when you have structures that can freeze tension, that means that there's always this little tension that's going on. Well, when there's tension, there's electricity. There's charge. And I was like, this, and so the Japanese star dome, the superstructure of the building is steel, and it's, imagine like a bow. When I'm teaching people about astrology, I love talking about the centaur and a Sagittarius and the tension of always aiming and shooting. There's always a dynamic tension with the Sagittarius, and Sagittarius doesn't feel right in their life unless there's this dynamic tension. Like they love the tension of the hunt, the tension of the aiming, like they have to have the tension of exercise. Sagittarius is comfortable with tension. And so these buildings were like build bridges. It's like, okay, with a bridge, the reason why a bridge can do what it's doing, bridges are super dynamic because they have this metal that's stretched, and it's usually an arch form, and it's stretched into this arch form, and then they freeze it in concrete. And I was like, I'm going to do these, because at the time that I saw the Stardome, they were only putting cloth on them. They were making them like tents. And I'm like, Negro, I'm going to freeze that in ferro cement. And it's worked out brilliantly, you know. And so, and part of the reason why I brought this up is like, so you're looking at the Lahovsky ring, or the Michelle's Healing Home ring that's going to go around your plants, right? There's a tension. To have an arch form, there's a tension. There's a gap. Mother Nature fills that gap. Technically, just so you know, this is the female, and the sun, the father sky, is filling this gap. This signal, this conductor, hopefully it's really pretty, because you know how you women like to be pretty. This pretty opening is now open to the sky, to father sky. Father sky drops down and inseminates with extra potential. Okay? The more of these you put, the more the signal is like, oh, you want more. Oh, you want more. Oh, more. It's just a sigil. And by sigil, I just mean you're properly signaling.
Mm-hmm.
You're just signaling your environment correctly. It's just a technology that has been subdued in our consciousness. That's all it is. And so when you build a dome, I've told this to everybody, building domes like raised my IQ like 20, 30 points. Because in bending these arch forms over my head and having to dynamically move my body and be uncomfortable, and you don't have a right angle, you don't have level, it rewired my brain. And in that instance, I knew what the Tibetans were really doing. Those mandalas were buildings. We just got the bullshit watered down version of, oh, hey, just color these boxes. And I mean, that does a little bit for you. But we all have to have that moment in the movie Contact where you're looking at something in 2 dimensions, and then you see its 3-dimensional art form. It's an arch form. We live under we live with Tiamat, but we're under the arch of Hathor. She's arching that huge arch. Even the way we perceive, our eyes are domes.
Right.
And so when people perceive a curve, all they're perceiving is their own curve of their... The curve isn't out there. There is no spoon.
Yeah, it's your internal curve.
It's literally your hardware.
Mm.
If your hardware is circular, guess what? Guess what, people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is why, like, people who see with their third eye, they don't have the same experience. That's all the difference is with people that think the one thing is one way and the thing is the other way. It's just the people that feel like they're what convention has taught them. What convention has taught them is not to use their third eye. That's all it's saying. It's not that they're bad or anything, or that they have, incorrect intention or whatever. It's just that they were taught not to use their third eye, and they don't use it.
Right. And I almost feel like too, there's like a heart connection there too. Like, because I look at, and then we're also kind of taught to not follow that as well. You know, you can hear the cliche sayings, follow your heart, follow your passion, or whatever. But until you truly understand what that actually means and the
Right.
connection between the third eye, the heart, and the eyes itself, you know, it really kind of just becomes a bumper sticker that you read somewhere at one time and it doesn't really translate. So,
Mhm.
my oh my, this is incredible, Topher. I'm so happy that we got a chance to talk a little more. And you know, I feel like, you know, we're going to talk more down the road because I have so many other things that I wanted to get to, but this was just glorious. I loved where our conversation went. Thank you so much for imparting so much wisdom. I have hella notes that I've written down. I've got research to do. And
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for joining me here in the Healing Home. And before I let you go, I want you to let people know where they can find you again. And if you have any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to impart on the audience, the floor is yours, sir.
Um, Probably what I'm most excited about now, other than setting up my spring garden. I mean, we have 20-degree temperatures outside right now, so the Missouri weather kind of fooled us a little bit in thinking that spring was early. It was not. But that gives me time to set up my new garden beds and stuff like that. And I'm going to be filming it all so everybody can see it, you know, all my biochar stuff that I'm doing. But I have to say, what I've been most contented by is I finally feel like my cosmology is completely coherent. And the way this is playing out for my clients, both my massage clients and my astrology clients, is I'm I'm getting to a level of proficiency of really letting them know about their astral body. And like I told you when we started, I'm pleased as punch that Mario is doing the work that he's doing with the polar. Because another thing I want to explain, like, if you don't mind, I want to show something.
Yeah, go for it.
So I have been working on a water purification system for about 15 years and have dumped a lot of money into it. And the main thing it's based around is something called a ring magnet, but it's a radially sintered ring magnet. So sintering is when they send a charge through a piece of metal like neodymium. The direction that they send the charge is where you have south and north on the metal. What makes ring magnets so expensive is that the charge from every direction is going to the center. This is the polar componentry of what Mario is talking about. So why have I spent all this time and money on radially sintered magnets? Because there's a magical thing that occurs. When you get all of the charge, all the magnetic fields to collapse to the center, you get a secondary pole. It's literally called a pole. It's called a virtual pole. So what occurs is, take that ring that I just had there, and now we're looking at it on the horizontal plane. I gotta get a new marker. So this is the ring looking at the side. With this being radially centered, where all the magnetism is going towards the north, which is the center, there's a virtual north up here.
Ah.
It's called scalar north. Scalar north has 40 times the magnitude. 40x. 40 times. Where have we heard 40 before? This point here is 40 times stronger than this point.
Wow.
And guess, when you're making plasma, and trying to control plasma, you do it with an array that creates that scalar north field. That's what we fucking live in.
Wow. Right.
This is the dielectric plane of inertia. This is the circumpunct. So on the physical level, we live in, like, let's just say, a ring of materium. All the energy is coming to this point, and then it shoots up to this secondary magnetic charge that's virtual. And it usually creates light. When they do this experimentally, that's where you get your light collection, is on scalar north. Pole star. That's the polar thing. He's dead on. The fixed stars, like, you know, in antiquity, the astral body of, like, all the wandering stars, those were archons. They were kind of a pain in the ass. What you actually gave attention to were the fixed stars behind the archons. They were flavoring everything. And so what I'm most contented by now is, like, talking to people about their astral body. I call it a celestic profile. I hate using the word astrology because most astrology is so gay and lame.
Yeah, garbage.
They're using wrong geometries and they're using a completely wrong cosmology.
Right.
So how can they say anything accurate?
Yeah.
Their heart isn't in it. Like, if you believe that thing is billions of miles away, shut the fuck up. And if you think, and if you think a body billions of miles away has an influence over you, like you're a victim, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you're lost. No, you're totally lost. Lost in the sauce.
And so the astral body is the stars. That's what astra means. You just go outside at night and look at your astral body. And so I'm bringing, I feel like, and I've now had 100, I've probably done about, I'd say over 20 years, I've probably done about 2,000 charts. And I would say in my last 100 charts, I'm at about a 96% accuracy rate.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Cracking codes.
And it's because the phenomenology is correct. I've gotten more accurate because I've actually had my hands, getting back to me being chiral. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to make magnet arrays that can purify water. And in that, of actually doing experiments with my hands and doing experiments with diamagnetic earth and with, you know, fractal antennas and all this other stuff, that has informed me at a higher level. It's not just like some, you know, intellectual masturbation. And so because I know when I'm building a magnet array that is radially centered, it's like what it's doing to my body when I'm actually like creating it. Like I have that imbued in my system. And so like in looking at the sonoluminescent frequency array that's above us and the correlations, I'm like, okay. I see. I see it. And I feel because it's been so long. I think I was exposed to astrology when I was 20 and I'm turning 48. So it's almost 30 years. 30 years of inquiry into this. And not standing pat and not being a tropical astrologer. And God love them because they hit like 60%, 65% of the time if they're good. But when you have the wrong cosmology, you're telling people the wrong thing. You're not telling them, actually, you're not giving them the why.
Right.
You're making it a very narcissistic thing. And so that's what I'm most excited about right now is I do this thing called a Celestic profile where and you'll laugh at this. I think I told you this last time we talked. So I had worked on so many pregnant women when I was coming up. I had so many friends of mine that were just having kids left, right, and center. And they were all kind of hippies. They all would do like conscious conception and stuff like that. And so they would know like when they conceived, you know. And so I started casting charts like for when their child was conceived relative to when the child was born. And then invariably the child always ended up being the way they were when they were conceived. But I didn't understand because my cosmology was incorrect. I was still a ball earther. I was still like, you know, and then getting flat smacked, as Dave Weiss would say, and then like coming through that whole thing. And then even coming through like actually working with water purification with these types of magnet arrays all brought me to like this, like, okay. And then also podcasting, like talking to people like you and like learning from, you know, all these people I supremely respect has brought me now to a cosmology that is coherent. It is a coherent from the most metaphysical down to the what we experience on the material level. And because of that, my level of accuracy with telling what, and I profile people. I don't call it astrology. I'm just like, this is a profile. Your Mars in Taurus isn't a planet in a constellation that's doing something to you. That's the male prince aspect of your consciousness that loves sex and loves the physical immersement. That's that aspect of your consciousness, and God is benevolent and wants you to see it because God is benevolent. God wants you to understand. And so here, this is what that is, you know. You have your Venus in Libra that like you love justice, like you find it aesthetically pleasing and you want proportionality and balance. And like, it's not that there's this thing out there doing it to you. And the transits is essentially like God, like changing it up on you because you don't know what's best for you. And the best thing in life is surprises. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's true.
So get over yourself.
Yeah, the faster you could do that, the fucking better. That's been my experience and continues to be my experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I'm most stoked about. That's like at topherhq.com. You guys can just email me at info@topherhq.com. My podcast, I love doing the podcast. I think people really are vibing with it really hard. You know, I'm a fire dragon. This is a wood metal dragon year. So like I'm firing on all cylinders. And yeah, I'm just really enjoying this trip that we're on.
Here, my friend. Well, I love it. And thank you so much for spending time with me on your Friday. And I wish you the best as you move forward. And I just really look forward to talking again, to watching you, to witnessing all the things that you create. And it's really beautiful. And I'm so stoked for you. So keep going, my friend. Keep going. As
yes,
I know you will.
I shall. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll talk soon. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All righty, my friends. Well, boy, oh boy, that was a ride. I'm so glad that Topher came by into the Healing Home. So thank you all for being here. That was awesome. As always, all of Topher's links are down below in the description. So I highly recommend checking out his website if you are unfamiliar with his work, because his dome homes are something to behold. And it's really cool to see the shapes, see the structure, see what he does. So check him out at topherhq.com. And before I let you guys all go, I've got some slides for you all. So we'll pop these up onto the screen. Anyone who wants to stick around, here's some updates. We will have those here, michelleshealinghome.com. As I said in the beginning of the show, for all things healing home, head to my website. And thank you to all the patrons out there. You guys are very much appreciated. As I always say, thank you so much. I really I'm going to be, I feel like I've said this once, but I am in the process of coming up with Patreon exclusive content because it's very necessary. And I want to share special things with you guys for all the people who are supporting and showing the support and have been showing the support for months. Thank you so much to all of you guys out there. Chance, Sarah G, Liam, Miriam, Hank, Erica, Moonlander, Mary, Louie, Logan, Mickey, Doreen, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, Stephanie, Charlie, Peter, Elise and James, Rachel, Trisha, Vanessa. Thank you so much. Patreon.com/The Healing Home for anyone who wants to join us over there. A handbook for herbal and natural cat care is available. I am beginning to work on the revision of this. It is a labor of love. So I'm happy to be adding things, to be pulling more information in and adding it to this ebook. And it will be, it's a work in progress. That's how I'm looking at this one, that I'm going to continue to add to it. And my goal is to actually make it an actual physical book. And that will happen because I'm going to keep working at it and adding things to it and making the revised versions available as I go. The monthly newsletter, Full Moon Offering newsletter, you can sign up for that also on Michelle's Healing Home. So if you aren't already on that list, I highly recommend being on there because it's the best way to keep up with me and to know all the products I have available. Now we are on number 42, which is my soap, shampoo, and tincture offering of blue vervain tincture, which is fresh, was grown in our garden, reishi mushroom double extract, which we wildcrafted on the Oregon coast. And I have oat and honey soap, comfrey nettle and pine shampoo bars, and calendula soap. I also now have soap. I have soap trays. I can't think of the word. Soap tray where you can put your soap on it, dries out throughout the uses. And I also have soap bags available all on my website. And up on the screen here, you can see my current menu, which is going fast. So thank you to everybody that's been placing orders. It feels so amazing to be sharing my work with you all and my creations. Thank you so much for all the support, all of you guys. It really means so much and it warms my heart. And it really is. It's such an inspiration. So thank you. Next Full Moon Offering newsletter is coming out on March 25th. So I'll have some new offerings for you guys then. Next week's show, I am pumped for. I am going to be interviewing Ola Wolny, and we're going to talk about the feminine mysteries. Now, I was introduced to Ola through Aeon Bite. She brought some really intriguing things to the table that I've been chewing on ever since I've heard her talk. Mario has known about her work for a while. And now that I am thinking about what she's been putting out there, I cannot wait to talk to her. So that will be coming up on March 12th at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And Mario, with his Patreon exclusive, he is going to be putting out his series called Symbolic Secrets. And I'm so excited for him to do this. So all the people that want to be involved in his tarot sessions that are coming up, he's going to be starting with the Fool card and going through the entire major arcana. And then who knows what he'll come up with next. But in order to get that content, you need to sign up for his Patreon. So you can do that at patreon.com/symbolic studies. And for all other things, Symbolic Studies and Mario, head to symbolicstudies.com. And obviously, he came up a handful of times in our conversation with Topher because he has really been tapping into some deep wisdom with the polar tradition. And man, he's bringing all these great things to the table, and people are starting to really come around and appreciate it and see that he is tapped into something. He's on to something. So go over there to at symbolicstudies.com and find him. And you can find him on all the social media outlets as well, including YouTube and Rumble. So with that, my friends, thank you so much. This will be coming out on March 5th. It's a pre-recorded episode, and I'm really excited to be doing more pre-recorded episodes. Actually, it suits me better to be doing the pre-records. I was talking to Topher about this backstage. Actually, my personality type and how I am, I feel like I'm really I'm honing my craft as I continue to make this podcast a reality. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing moving forward, is putting out a little bit more pre-recorded episodes. It helps me feel more focused. And so to everyone out there listening, everybody who's in the chat for the pre-recorded show or the premiere, thank you for being here. I'll probably be in the chat myself. And I just wish you guys the best. And hopefully you're having a good day or good evening whenever you decide to watch this. And until next time, take care out there, and we will see you very soon. Cheers.